You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a PayPal button at that very website, or you could mail us a letter if you want, and or a contribution at Post Office Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for the week of August 16th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where we want to extend an invitation to Vice President Kamala Harris to come on this podcast of ours, or her running mate, whose name escapes me at the moment.
What manner of man are you that can summon up fire without flint or tinder?
I am an enchanter.
By what name are you known?
There are some who call me Tim.
Greetings, Tim the Enchanter.
Oh, that's right. Tim Walz, come on down to The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal. We'll treat you right.
When you're here, you're family.
Hi, everybody. One quick housekeeping note. We heard from a friend of the pod that very suddenly he was unable to get us through our hosting service, Buzzsprout. And he found out that the problem was he was using a VPN. And Buzzsprout is filtering VPNs now. There's also a bunch of stuff going on with Apple, iOS, and Patreon. And Apple is apparently going to get payments via Patreon, or Apple is going to charge Patreon something. It's all very complicated. I would check with Patreon on the Patreon website to figure out if you're using the Patreon app on your Apple iPhone. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some changes. That's the thing. So
you'll not get the third season of Counterpart. Sorry, that's just
there is no third season.
Oh, that's
of
right. There
Counterpart.
is no third season. God damn it. That's right.
Anyhow, yeah.
Now, we were in the middle of a conversation, Blue Gal, on Tuesday when
yes, we were
rudely cut off by the fact that we ran out of time. So
we were running along. So where were we on Tuesday again? Oh yes, the press needs Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris doesn't need the press because I don't know if you all know this. It's kind of a deep, dark, hidden secret, but the job of the Democratic candidate is to win. Mm-hmm. And if pandering to the tantrums of a thoroughly broken and complicit media doesn't improve her chances of winning, why in the wide world of sports should she do that? Mm-hmm. And in case you hadn't noticed, at this moment, the Harris-Walz ticket is, in fact, winning.
I did just win. Surely you noticed.
You haven't won a damn thing.
I found out the way your mind works and the kind of man you are. I know your plans and expectations. You've burbled every bit of strategy you've got. I know exactly what you will do and exactly what you won't. And I've told you exactly nothing. To these aged eyes, boy, that's what winning looks like. Dormez bien.
This is from Brian Tyler Cohen. Quote, if the media can't show that it can differentiate fact from fiction, then why should Kamala Harris be sitting down and rewarding these people with more time when they're already dropping the ball with Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Unquote. Now, hat tip to my colleague Carolee, who brought this to my attention. There's a post by Doc Searles. It's a long essay about how storytelling works and why, in the political environment, we're stuck with that. Quote, journalism avoids reporting what doesn't fit the story format. This includes most of reality. We will link this story in our show notes. Mm-hmm. One of the big examples he uses is the killing fields and how millions of people were dying and being murdered in Cambodia. But until it was one man against Pol Pot and became a movie, it wasn't a story that the media wanted to tell, even though it was millions of people dying. Now, why this whole thing with Kamala and a press conference? Why doesn't this fit a story? Because, listen, the media only has a couple of Jell-O molds it uses for every political story. Mm-hmm. One of their favorite Jell-O molds is Dems in Disarray, which is failing them this time. They must have put fresh pineapple in the Jell-O driftglass because it's not gelling there.
It's not working. That one's not
working at all. Mm-hmm. The other one is Both Sides Do It. Mm-hmm. And the contrast between a Kamala Harris rally and a Donald Trump J.D. Vance rally at this point, saying both sides is on its face a joke.
Yeah.
And the final one is the one that really sticks in Driftglass's craw the most.
Yeah, I have a craw. And it's full of sticky. So yes, that is true.
and that Jell-O mold is, look, whatever's happening with the Republican Party, it all started in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still a lot of good Republicans out there. And the true Republicanism, the decent Republicanism from before 2015 is being held hostage by MAGA.
Yeah.
If we can just get rid of MAGA and move on from Trump, we'll get back to that good old Republican Party that you all remember so well.
That MAGA minority that somehow
MAGA minority has
party.
sucked out all the energy right now.
Right.
But we'll come back eventually. Eventually, the czar will return.
Just hold out hope.
No rebranding of this party.
No. In fact, we have an excellent example of that that was sent along to us because we don't watch the Morning Joe thing. But somebody, actually more than one somebody, decided to bring this to our attention. So we're bringing it to your attention. This was David French. David French, as you probably know from this podcast, is a longtime right-wing evangelical guy who worked for National Review, had a lot of really hairy, awful, creepy views, had to tidy himself up really quick so he could get a job at the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And now he's a trusted member of the New York Times op-ed page staff, which means he gets to go on shows like Morning Joe and tell America the following, quote, "There are still many Republicans who don't realize how different MAGA is from traditional Republicanism. There are still many Republicans who believe they're voting for at least strong elements of the older party, and Trump benefits immensely from this. Okay, kids," that's an unquote, by the way. "What is wrong with this statement?"
You were lying your ass off.
Yeah, he's lying about it. He's lying about it, and he knows he's lying about it, and everyone on the panel knows he's lying about it because everyone can see what's going on with the Republican Party and the way they vote, 65, 70 million of them, voting for the same traitor 3 times now. Yeah. This is not an accident. Yeah. This is the result of decades of hard work and billions of dollars spent to create this partisan base. But David French can't admit this is the case, especially since he's an evangelical. So this all has to have happened like a lightning bolt out of the blue, and he gets a platform to lie to you, and we don't. And that's how the media works. And speaking of which, just as a brief aside, as we are recording this, or perhaps just before we recorded this, Donald Trump was doing that thing where he stands at a podium and lies, and everyone pretends it's a press conference. Mm-hmm. And there are a bunch of houseplants just sitting there staring at him, and they're writing down what he says, and I'm sure it'll show up in your newspapers or on television tomorrow. That's not a press conference. That's a man standing at a podium who is clearly demented, lying to a bunch of stenographers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So why would Kamala Harris ever want to play in that pond?
Why does she want to participate in that?
Exactly.
But and why should she want to participate in what will be a completely lopsided experience?
Yeah, a bunch of gotcha.
Which is they're not going to sit there like houseplants for her.
No.
They're holding her to a completely infinitesimally higher standard than they are Donald Trump.
I don't think the word you want is infinitesimally.
I don't want infinitesimally. Massively. That's what
massively.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. They are holding Donald Trump to an infinitesimally smaller standard. That's
lower,
what I
meant. And no standard at all. Literally no standard at all.
Really, no standard.
Stand up there and lie. And somebody like NPR, somebody will say, "Oh, there's 162 lies."
Yeah, let's
in 60
count
minutes.
them. That'll be a good idea. Let's count them.
And let's have a graph. Rather than shutting the camera off and saying, "We're not pointing another camera at you until you start either answering questions about your lies or stop lying," neither of which he can do. But that's not going to happen because that's not the world we live in.
Yeah.
However,
know what question I'd like them to ask Donald Trump while he's talking about all these tax cuts he wants to give people? The Heritage Foundation has decided that they're going to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. The latest idea, they did the state and local taxes, thing of taking that deduction away from certain people.
Right.
Their latest idea is taxing health insurance business benefits.
Really?
For people who work for private employers.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That if you have more than $15,000 worth of benefits a year, you'll be taxed for those benefits. Now, who doesn't have $15,000 a year of health insurance benefits?
Uh-huh.
everybody who works for a private company full time
Uh-huh.
and gets health insurance for them and their family through their work is going to pay more in taxes.
Yeah. But, you know.
Unless you get your money in tips as a hedge fund manager.
Right. If you get cash tossed over the transom or you get it in other forms, that's fine.
Paid in stock that
And
you borrow money on, then you're not going to be taxed.
And if you have a boutique doctor, that you have on retainer 24 hours
Right.
a day,
Right.
then flies right on the radar.
That's not insurance or a benefit. Yeah.
No, that's your pal. He's coming to your house to make sure your gallbladder's working.
Mm-hmm. But look, even among otherwise clear-eyed media critics, there is an ongoing magical thinking about the media. It's like a phantom limb, Driftglass. They keep imagining a journalism which is all but extinct and insisting that we all have to treat it like it's the real thing.
It's like Tinkerbell. If we just
You're
clap
ignoring
hard
Walter
enough.
Cronkite, who's
Right.
out here
Mhm.
working hard.
Mhm.
No, it's Chris Cillizza. It's not Walter Cronkite. I promise you.
No.
So we have an example here. Margaret Sullivan. She was the 5th public editor appointed by the New York Times and served in that role from September 2012 until April 2016. And here's what she wrote in The Guardian this week. Quote, Kamala Harris must speak to the press. Even if you very much hope Harris prevails over Trump, that's not a good enough reason to cheer on her press avoidance. She has members of the press on her airplane, Driftglass. To her credit, unquote, excuse me. To her credit, she starts right off addressing the biggest reason why the Harris campaign has been shunning the press. Quote, I can understand why Kamala Harris hasn't given a sit-down interview to a major media organization or done a no-holds-barred press conference since she began her presidential campaign a few weeks ago. From a tactical or strategic point of view, there's little reason to. After all, she's enjoying a honeymoon phase with a lot of positive media and a nearly ecstatic reception from much of the public. When the vice president has interacted with reporters in recent weeks, as in a brief gaggle during a campaign stop, the questions were silly. Seeking campaign drama rather than substance, they centered on Donald Trump's attacks, or when was she planning to do a press conference?
Right.
She's standing there talking to the media. When are you going to do a press conference? I'm doing one right now. The former president, meanwhile, does talk to reporters, but he lies constantly.
Yeah.
NPR tracked 162 lies and distortions in his hour-long so-called press conference. Press conference last week at Mar-a-Lago, unquote. Now, Sullivan goes on to make it very clear that she has very little confidence that the White House press corps is up to the job that she wants them to do.
You know what? If we had a good press, if we had a decent, I would want them to do it too.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't have one. There isn't one. Yeah.
Right. They're all failures at this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she persists. Quote, but Harris needs to overcome these objections and do what's right. Unquote. Yeah. Now, this is just wrong, especially when she mentions where the pressure is coming from. Yeah. Now, listen to this. This is where the pressure is coming for Kamala Harris to do a press conference. And this is, Margaret Sullivan is acknowledging this, okay? This is her article. Quote, the pressure on Harris to open up is growing. It's a constant complaint on Fox News, both by Fox anchors and by Republican politicians, including her rival Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. And mainstream media, perhaps tiring of being so unnaturally positive, has picked up on it too. Time's just about up on Harris to avoid this becoming a thing, warned Benji Sarlin of Semaphore, unquote. Margaret saying that Fox is bitching about this so loud that even Semaphore noticed is not the flex she thinks it is. It really isn't.
Why won't Barack Obama show us his birth certificate? No. Why won't he show us the long form of his birth certificate? Why is he hiding his birth certificate? Hey, now people in the mainstream media are asking the same question.
I heard about it at the hairdresser.
Now everyone's talking about it. Why won't Obama do what we tell him to do?
Yeah.
What's he hiding? This is, and the press fucking falls for it. I can't say falls for it because they're complicit. This is what they want to do or they wouldn't be doing it.
Well, it's the only story they have.
Right.
It's the only thing she's quote unquote failing at right now.
And because you can't, or you're fired. You'll run a story that
you
Donald
better
Trump
find
is
something wrong.
Right. Donald Trump is a lying sack of shit who should never be president is not a story that will keep you your job at the New York Times. Writing a story about why is Kamala Harris avoiding the press? What's she hiding? Why won't she do this? When all of that is being pimped out by Fox News, is that the only thing they can talk about anyway?
Now, to her credit, she recognized her legitimate critics and acknowledges that they might be right. She highlights a long thread by Jeff Jarvis that begins like this, quote, "What press? The broken and vindictive Times, the newly Murdochian Post, hedge fund newspaper husks, rudderless CNN and NPR, Murdoch's fascist media?" No, she can choose many ways to communicate her stance with others outside the old press and with the public directly. The old press can and should be bypassed, says Jeff Jarvis, unquote. So, and that's why Margaret Sullivan's worth hearing out. But in this case, she's just dead wrong. Yeah. And Elie Mystal, my TV husband, is right. Elie Mystal wrote, quote, "Why the fuck would Harris give an interview with any of these publications that are so clearly running a protection game for her opponent? Harris should give an interview to the Griot and no one the fuck else unless New York Times, Washington Post, and Politico publish his emails, which they are covering up for him."
Yes, they are. They're sitting on them. All of them are sitting on them.
Yeah. You know, we also believe Tim Walz should grant an interview to the Cornfield Resistance here at the Professional Life Podcast.
Lines are open. You know, if you want to dial in, you know, my name's Tim, longtime listener, first time caller, and future vice president. That's fine. That's fine. And we'll talk about whatever you want. I'd love to talk to you about manufacturing, workforce development, life in the Midwest. What does it feel like to have the coasts talk over you constantly when there's so much cool shit happening here? How do you...
Do you have a butter cow at your state fair?
Minnesota should have a butter cow. You know, you
What's
really should.
What's in your crock pot?
Right.
And I mean that literally. That's not a gotcha question.
Yeah. What kind of cover dish do you bring to a funeral? I mean, what's the proper one? Do you crumble potato chips on top of the casserole?
Or cornflakes?
Cornflakes. You know, these are the decisions we are faced with.
You know what I do? A stick of butter and Ritz crackers. Crush up a tube of Ritz crackers. It's so good.
That's just good eating. That's just damn good eating. So he's welcome here. And Vice President Harris is, of course, welcome here as well. But it seems to me that Tim Walz is doing his thing and that he would find a very welcome home here to do his thing for an hour or however long he wants to talk. Now, something we haven't talked about for a couple of years, and that's my failure, is something I called shelter culture. That was my trademarked antonym for cancel culture. And it's used to describe organizational cultures that are actively protecting smarmy, always wrong hacks who definitely would have been fired for incompetence long ago in any other enterprise.
Yeah.
And you all by now know the long list of people who have no business having a spotlight on them or haven't earned it. And people who do, people who have earned the right to have their opinions shared more widely using television cameras, who will never be allowed on it because we'll start telling stories that the executives there don't want to hear because they're very embarrassing. But they're clear. Cancel culture was 98% right-wing bullshit. It was just something to talk about, something to beat up. We need an equivalent to all the crazy shit we're doing. So we're going to talk about campus speech codes.
Right.
Because, yeah, that's a big deal. That's pretty much the same as Donald Trump ruining the fucking country and the entire Republican Party being a bunch of traitors.
And the Muslim ban.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same. And we'll give the wingnuts, you know, a simple phrase to repeat over and go, cancel culture, cancel culture. Yeah, if there were a cancel culture, truly cancel culture in this country, Joe Scarborough would have been off television 15 years ago. And Maureen Dowd would have retired 20 years ago to go keep bees in Essex or something. You know, just go away. So there is no such thing. And that is a phrase I have promised people to try to renew, because that's what's protecting our good people, the people that we all know and loathe on the networks and the newspapers. A culture that protects them from the vicissitudes of marketplace judgments. Because if they actually had to face the wrath of the people they've been lying to all this time, they would be out of work tomorrow.
Right. And formulating what the agenda is by how loud Fox News is about it. Yeah. Is just a failure of your constitutionally protected duties. I want wanted to talk for a minute. I know I've mentioned this before and how important it is to recognize this large swath of voters who want to vote for the winner and want to be cool when it comes to voting. And they have all other kinds of, pressures on them. They don't want to vote for a chick necessarily. They don't necessarily want to vote for a black person often. But this idea that it often comes down to vibes. And for some voters, it's simply, I can't go to a bar and tell a woman that I voted for fill in the blank.
Right.
And people that are extraordinarily sensitive to this are people like Joe Rogan and Tim Pool, who have been trying to weasel out of their support for Trump this past week.
Well, bad for their brand.
And and they don't know how to do it. So they're like toying with RFK Jr. and finding out that blows up in their face instantly. And, I didn't say I was voting for him. I just said I liked his ideas, says Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And eventually that I think is where we're going to have to go. That is going to be the entryway to rebranding the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
Joe Rogan's going to come up with some club or some hat or some T-shirt that erases the time with Trump.
Yeah. And right behind him, David French, in the legitimate media, in the New York Times media, will be explaining how most Republicans are really good people.
Yeah.
Most Republicans just got
and by the way,
taken
this is a whole new movement. We've never seen this before.
Yeah. But most Republicans were just bamboozled by this tiny minority of bad actors.
Right.
And now that they're gone, we can go back to the good old days.
We can go back to being really good Republicans that we always were. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think,
and to the extent that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz help that narrative forward, they're going to find resistance from us.
They will.
This is down the road. We're very happy with them right now.
Yes.
We will not always be quite so happy with them.
No.
When they start to make peace with their Republican friends on the other side of the aisle, we've got news for them.
Well, and that's when Tim Walz will have to come back on the Professional podcast
and get screamed at by us.
And we like, brother, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? How many different? Don't you understand the term recidivist? You know what happens when you don't punish criminals? They go out and do more crimes.
Yeah.
I'm sure he understands that.
Well, and as I said to you last night, I had mentioned to you that Tim Walz was on the Ezra Klein podcast talking about Trump supporters in his family.
Right.
And how, Trump poked the bear. That's why they liked him. And I said, this is really bad from our standpoint that, trying to make peace with former Republicans or current Republicans. But he's expecting a lot of Republicans, especially Republican women, to vote for them.
Yeah, or stay home.
Or stay home, but he doesn't want to alienate them. And I said to you, this is his job right now. And we as, liberals with a voice in the base of the Democratic Party have a different thing.
We have a different job. We absolutely have a different job.
So we'll keep up. We'll do our job. You go ahead and do your job. But we're going to keep doing our job, which is to call out the racist group of people that are the entire Republican Party.
Yeah. And one clue that we talked about earlier today between you and I, as we were just snuggling and talking about politics like we do, was the way RFK is shopping himself around now.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like at least an ambassadorship for my endorsement.
Yeah. From Kamala Harris.
From Kamala Harris.
He's shopping himself to anybody who will pay him.
Trump's not giving me money no more, right? Yeah,
said? That's my Billy Crystal running scared imitation. Because Trump don't pay me no more. And I'm mad. I'm mad. He don't pay me no more. So will you give me ambassadorship, huh?
And maybe a cabinet position?
Cabinet? What about cabinet posts? That would be lovely. Now I got to go watch Jeopardy. And it's so clear that he's just like, who will pay me? Who will pay me? Who will meet my price? $20, same as in town. Who? Because he's got a handful of anti-vax lunatics and people who think Trump's just not quite crazy enough.
Yeah, and he doesn't think he can make Joe Rogan money in the podcast world.
No, and he can't.
Yeah, and he can't. He can't speak.
His voice is terrible, and his ideas are nuts, and he meanders. And he's good at separating. When he's talking to a mainstream crowd, he tells one set of stories. When he's talking to his people, he tells a completely different set of whack job lies.
While somebody's got a camera phone running.
Right. And he doesn't understand
He doesn't
that we can see both.
that we can see him. Yeah.
And his little pocket of voters is not enough to do anything for his fortunes in the future. Now, we would like to salute the current president, a man named Joseph Robinette Biden, for hosting something called the Creator Economy Conference. There's a video of it online. It's really good. Biden is funny, and he's very relaxed. He did a great job. He was cracking wise with the kids, talking about his age. And, well, you know, I got to go looking for a job now. So that's my next thing. But we both thought the creator economy and the people who were there who were, you know, he's talking about cutting through the noise and delivering, you know, information to the people, bypassing the media and doing that sort of thing. And we both thought, wow, I'm so old. I remember when those people were called bloggers.
That's what Carolyn said too.
Yeah.
Like this was blogger. These are bloggers, right?
These are bloggers. And we weren't there because I guess we're too old now. So we weren't invited or whatever the reason is. But because blogging has been pronounced dead like 17 times in the last 20 years. You know, officially dead. Pennies on the eyes dead. And one of the things about being an OG blogger, as we've mentioned before, is we have catacombs, we have wine cellars, we have archives. Deep below the ground, I have 11,000 coming on 12,000 posts going back to 2005, sitting in my archives. I've got a shit ton of writing out there that I did. And a lot of the stuff that I want to research, like a clip I'm not going to play for you today because I tampered with it a little bit and I don't want to subject you to it, but was from 2011. And I'll tell you why it's kind of interesting and why that came to my attention, because when I heard Donald Trump slagging people with public sector jobs because, you know, those aren't real jobs, I thought, where have I heard this before? Oh, yeah. And I took that long spiral staircase down to my archives to the year 2011, February of 2011. And it was This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And there was a man there who was rolling his eyes at the Obama administration's economic recovery because, you know, many of those new jobs were public sector jobs, which he told us over and over again weren't real jobs, because only private sector jobs are real jobs, because public sector jobs come to an end and private sector jobs never end. Despite the fact we had just been living through a great recession that caused millions of people to lose their private sector jobs, especially in manufacturing. And the man who was sitting there on the stage, lying his ass off, telling us that teachers and cops and the Coast Guard and judges and public defenders and the Coast Guard, none of those people have real jobs. My mom worked as a teacher for 40 years. She didn't have a real job. My dad was a principal for 42 years. He didn't have a real job because they're all public sector jobs. This is coming as a shock to all the people who work for a living to make the world a better place.
And all the people applying for firefighter jobs in Florida at that time.
The public sector jobs. These are all public sector jobs. The man was a gentleman named Michael Steele. At the time, he was the Republican National Committee chair. He was he
was reflecting what John Boehner was saying on the floor of the House. I mean, This was the line. Was we can't have government spending to prop up the economy because those aren't real jobs.
Those aren't real jobs. And believe me, listening to the CBS Mystery Theater from the 1970s, the number of news breaks about will there be enough government jobs spending provided to make sure unemployment doesn't run out of control was just something he did.
That's what Nixon did.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Standard, you know, when there's and it was auto company layoffs, huge layoffs in the auto industry, and companies shutting down. And the concern was, well, can we make enough government jobs to tide these people over, basically? And that was just standard policy. That was just a given. But I'm talking about people who've had jobs their entire lives, teaching kids, you know, helping people in hospitals and so forth.
Being a police officer, being a firefighter.
But there's fucking Michael Steele in February of 2011 lying about that because they had to send a black guy out to lie about Barack Obama. And that was his job. So he sat there, and even George Stephanopoulos, as I recall, sat there looking dumbfounded at him. Like, you can't be serious. You're going to sit here and tell me that private sector jobs never end and public sector jobs aren't real. And You can now
and John
find
Boehner had been working in the House of Representatives for how long?
800 years.
Yeah.
800, until he got a job, pimping pot. Good for him.
Pot in Ohio. Yes. Yeah.
But you can currently see Michael Steele on MSNBC every Saturday. He has his own show.
MSNBC is not our friend, Driftglass.
Yeah, and his very inconvenient past, which is just a little bit of it, has all been sanded down and repainted to match the specs of his current employer. So, yay, memory hole. It holds a whole bunch of shit.
Hole.
Yeah.
Speaking of holes.
Yeah.
There was a windowed envelope that arrived in the mail today with a little window with my address in it. And it had Kamala Harris's picture on the front of the envelope and a quote from Kamala Harris. And, oh, this is great. It's all from Kamala Harris and about America and how great America is. And don't you want to support this? And, of course I do. And you open it up and there's another envelope. And I mean, a mailable envelope with a window with my address in it. And that envelope is from Chuck Schumer for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee.
Surprise!
And that's some heavy duty rebranding and turning on a dime rebranding.
Oh yeah, well,
because Chuck Schumer asking for money isn't going to get what a picture of Kamala Harris and her statement about America is going to get.
I think Kamala Harris has something that has been talked about for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Coattails.
Yeah. And a nice Q score.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who are like, wait a minute, we could actually win this thing. We could actually win a lot of this stuff.
Well, and you know who is really worried about a, quote, Democratic sweep? And I know I'm supposed to go outside and spit in the snow and turn around 3 times when I say that.
You are.
It's August in Illinois right now. There's no snow to spit on.
Well, you got a butter cow. Go spit on the butter cow.
I get arrested by J.B. Pritzker if I spit on the butter cow. But seriously, the person who gave a speech to big donors this week about how bad things are, and this might be a Democratic sweep, was Mitch McConnell. Yeah. And I'll tell you about the turtle.
Yeah.
I'm wearing blue feathers to his funeral.
Yeah.
I will never forgive him for the number of Supreme Court seats he stole. He's a thief.
Yeah, he's a thief and a monster.
But he knows how to count.
Yes, he does.
He knows how to count votes out there in the hinterland, and he knows how to count votes in the House and the Senate. And he is challenging, I would say, his big donors to meet the moment and help out and save us, save him, save his party. And it's not working.
And you know who else was concerned, although I take his concern with a massive, grain of salt, a salt lick, if you will. Frank Luntz.
Oh, yeah.
Who was warning that, you people over there, it's not me, you people. And I took that as and to solve your problem, you should definitely hire Frank Luntz Incorporated. But he's not wrong. He's just using their distress as a way to sell them the product that he's been selling to Republicans for 40 years, which is, his unique brand of focus grouping and lying and pushing the message that he wants. But
and don't forget that Frank Luntz was at the Caucus Room Steakhouse.
Oh yeah, no,
Inauguration day, on Obama's inauguration day, plotting with Newt Gingrich and Mitch McConnell how they were just going to block everything,
sabotage the Obama,
and then it would be, why can't Obama lead? Because he's not getting anything done because we blocked everything via the Senate. And that's Mitch McConnell.
Frank Luntz is a terrible person, and we know from Keith Olbermann that MSNBC hires him from time to time to do things because, there's just a group of amoral criminals out there that all the networks hire, and that's maybe the problem with the fucking media. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's do a news roundup, Drift Class. The Bidening continues.
I love news roundups. Go ahead, Blue Gal.
This is from President Joseph Robinette Biden. Quote, Judy is a retired nurse who's relied on Enbrel to manage her psoriatic arthritis for nearly 20 years. Last year, she paid $9,000 out of pocket for it. Let me tell you something, guys. I thought that Driftglass's deductible for our insurance was $5,600 this year. And it was.
Yep.
His max out of pocket for each of us is $9,200.
Yeah.
And every doctor who he saw at the ER that night when we thought he was losing his vision charge them a copay.
Yeah, and everyone I've seen since. And I understand they're not, the doctors aren't sitting there with a boot saying pay up or leave, but that's the way the system works.
That's the way the billing system works.
Yep.
So the GoFundMe is still up there because we're still getting bills for one night in the ER.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I this retired person who needs a drug, my God.
A retired nurse, for God's sake.
Yeah, right. So continuing, Joe Biden talks about the solution for this. In 2026, thanks to Medicare price negotiation, she'll pay less than half of what she used to pay to fill a prescription, unquote. Yeah. Also, Medicare, they're capping out-of-pocket drug costs in 2025 at $2,000.
Yeah.
Per patient.
This I know this is the S word. That I should never use, but this should be a screaming headline in every newspaper.
Yep.
For days. This is major. This is something that people have tried to do since Medicare was started.
Right. Absolutely.
And it was like, can't do it. Drug companies won't let you do it, and insurance companies won't let you do it. Everyone looks up at Canada and sees that the same drugs cost a fraction. It's just across the border. Why can't we do this? Well, we just can't. It's impossible. It cannot be done. And the Biden administration did it. And it's not Medicare for all. Yeah. And it's not a public option, but it's better. And that's
and it's making lives better.
Yeah.
And I want to give major props to Bernie Sanders for not letting this go.
Hell yeah. No.
And Bernie Sanders has been a tremendous surrogate this week.
Really has.
In explaining to the media the position that liberals are taking in this election. That this election is about defeating Donald Trump, that it is perfectly okay to disagree with Joe Biden about Gaza and a host of other things. But that this is a consequential election and that we must keep Donald Trump out of office. And he has been really terrific about this.
Yeah. No, he is a...
And, both Chris Hayes and the CNN guy, Anderson Cooper. Well, isn't it true that, and it's the Jell-O mold again. I want Democrats in disarray. I'm going to keep pushing this Jell-O mold on your face until you give it to me. And Bernie won't play that.
Well, and another story that follows on neatly after that one is that we are in fact experiencing an economic recovery from a pandemic that is the envy of the rest of the world.
Yep.
Absolutely. But all of that is just ignored or dismissed or discounted in the media. Instead, the media told us that a major recession was right around the corner. We should all panic and hoard food and guns because a major recession is coming. And this has been so relentless and effective that according to CNBC, 59% of Americans wrongly think the U.S. is currently in a recession, which it manifestly is not.
Yes.
But 2/3 of this country think, oh no, we're definitely in a recession. Yep. Because I've heard it a million times. We're not, and we're not going to be anytime in the near future. The reason I know that is the Bank of America CEO said that his research team told him that they do not have any recession predicted anymore, period. Okay. That socialists who run Bank of America apparently think we're in reasonably good shape for the foreseeable future.
Bernie called Biden the most progressive president since FDR.
Yeah. And he is.
And these policies worked.
Right.
And are working. We've had a soft landing in this inflationary period. We've had a soft landing. We didn't go into recession.
Right. Which is almost impossible.
Progressive policies, government investment in infrastructure and R&D works. Those are progressive policies. They work.
I believe at the Creators Convention, one of Joe Biden's parting shot was, we have achieved a soft landing. My policies worked. Maybe you should write about that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't directed at the conference members. It was directed at the press sitting in the back.
Why don't you write about that?
Yeah.
From the BBC, RFK Jr. has been denied New York ballot access over false address.
Yeah.
He does not meet the legal requirement of a New York resident and therefore cannot be on the state's election ballot, a judge has ruled. Kennedy's claim of a New York address as his place of residence on nominating petitions, was a false statement, said Judge Christina Ryba. If the ruling is upheld, it would not only bar Mr. Kennedy from the New York ballot, but also lead to challenges in other states where he uses that address on the forms. Mr. Kennedy dismissed the ruling as a partisan attack and noted the judge as a Democrat. How does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
However, in her 34-page ruling, Judge Ryba said the overwhelming credible evidence introduced at trial suggested that Mr. Kennedy only held a New York address for political standing. Given the size and appearance of the spare bedroom, as shown in the photographs admitted into evidence, the court finds Kennedy's testimony that he may return to that bedroom to reside with his wife, family members, multiple pets, and all of his personal belongings to be highly improbable, if not preposterous.
Yeah.
So he listed a spare bedroom in some relative's house as his main address.
Yeah. And that's not working.
No. Maybe he can buy a house in New York when he isn't a cabinet member no more.
Yeah. Well, and that's, if you want to live in LA, just live in LA. Why not list your LA address as your address? Yeah. I don't understand it, but he screwed up and he got caught. And that little spare bedroom is not where the entire Kennedy group is going to, live at any time soon. It's like the size of our bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm afraid all of your falcons will not fit in there, sir. This is from Brother Charlie Pierce in Esquire magazine. Putting the hell in helicopter. It's a much longer thing that we're going to just excerpt here. What in the hell conclusions are we supposed to draw from this? On Thursday, in the middle of a press conference, better described in psychological terms as an episode, the former president of the United States told a story so utterly impossible as to confuse the listener as to exactly where the lying ended and the dementia began. Former President Donald J. Trump told a jaw-dropping story on Thursday about nearly dying in a helicopter ride with Willie Brown, the former California politician and ex-boyfriend of his rival, Vice President Kamala Harris. It wasn't the famous former San Francisco mayor on the helicopter flight at all. It was Governor Jerry Brown, the former governor of California who bears little resemblance to Willie Brown. There was also no emergency landing, and the helicopter's passengers were never in any danger at all, according to Governor Gavin Newsom, who was also on the flight. Jerry Brown, who left office in January 2019, said through a spokesman, there was no emergency landing and no discussion of Kamala Harris. And of course, as they were spiraling towards certain death, Willie Brown, who was not on the helicopter, nonetheless took time to dish some dirt on Kamala Harris on the way down, unquote.
Since I know we're going to die in this helicopter crash, let me tell you some dirt about Kamala Harris.
Oh, wait a minute, Lord. Just one more second, Lord. I have to crap on Kamala Harris, even though I'm not on this fucking helicopter at all.
I'm not here.
honestly, this is the longest piece of coverage I've seen about this. And This is an average day in the life of Donald Trump.
It is.
Lies like this and just insisting this really happened. It's just another day. And again, the story of Donald Trump is manifestly incompetent, demented, lying racist is unfit to be president. That is the only story, but that's not the story that you can tell in the media.
It has to be a horse race because we need ratings in October and November. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. From the Tennessee Holler, unearthed audio from 2021 shows Michelle Morrow, Republican nominee to run North Carolina schools with an $11 billion budget. She called for a pro-Trump military coup against the United States government.
Yeah. Wasn't subtle about it either.
Wasn't subtle about it.
Because he's really
Just
president.
Suspend the Constitution.
Because he's still president. He's still really president.
Oh, and he's still president running the military. He went off on that nut job tangent.
So she should just tell the military, which he's in charge of, that they should invoke the Insurrection Act.
Right. And take over the government.
Yeah.
And dismiss Congress and just run things. Yeah.
And speaking of the media, as you know, inflation fell to 2.9% in July, meaning consumer price growth slowed to its lowest level of the post-pandemic period. Guess how Politico reported it? Quote, inflation is easing. Now Harris has an even bigger problem with the economy, unquote.
And New York Times PitchBot just went, I got nothing.
I got nothing. Honestly, the greatest hero of our time is New York Times PitchBot.
Yeah.
Because really...
But they're running out of runway because these headline writers are just... Ken Delanian's hot scoop this week was that Hunter Biden sent a letter to someone in the U.S. Embassy in Italy trying to get a meeting while his dad was vice president but the dad didn't even know the letter was sent, never got involved, and no meeting ever occurred.
Well, sure.
Wow.
That's on one hand. On the other hand, it's been reported that Willie Brown, in his death spiral as they were going down, wanted to say, in addition to Kamala Harris, let me say a few things about Hunter Biden, who I don't know. This is via Mark Jacob. Quote, and this is a very good catch, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
The very first sentence in this Politico story says, J.D. Vance wants to boost the child tax credit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clear, unambiguous, that's his intention. The very last sentence in this story says Vance didn't show up in the Senate 2 weeks ago to vote on an increase in the child tax credit, unquote.
You know, one of the reasons that the inflation rate fell to 2.9% in July is that Americans changed their shopping habits.
Yeah,
we
did.
And said, no,
mm-hmm.
we're not paying a lot for that muffler, and we're not paying a lot for that snack cake or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped going to Starbucks.
Right. Hello, Harbor Freight.
They stopped going to Panera.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we noticed that
Panera was like $20 for a sandwich and soup. People stopped going.
Yeah. And suddenly, Panera's got this special $5 offer or something.
Right. Exactly.
Oh,
all of a sudden, that slows inflation because corporations realize, we went too high too fast.
Yeah.
And people are balking. Consumers are balking. Well, consumers of Politico are balking too.
Yeah. Yes.
They see this crap and they just, I unsubscribed and I was subscribing to the Axios newsletters for work because I work for Crooks and Liars. And sometimes I need a breaking news thing from Axios. And I unsubscribed from all of that. And, they had the gall to ask me why I was unsubscribing. And I told them, you're anti-Biden bullshit. And it was so heavy at that point, the dropout chorus. I just had it. And we don't have to consume this crap. I mean, we're bringing it up to criticize it.
Right.
But you can unsubscribe from those newsletters. And you don't have to watch
You won't miss a thing.
Michael Steele on Saturday morning to stay informed.
You really won't. Just hang out with the Professional Left and a few other podcasts. It'll get
and
you
some
through
blogs. I have Apple News. I mean, there's things I have to have for work. I have to, read social media and find out sort of what's going on.
Are we going to watch the convention parts of it? Yes.
Yes.
Do we have like closed circuit television in our own home that gives us the picture? No. So we're going to have to watch it over a TV or cable network, which we will do.
Right.
That doesn't mean we approve of 90% of what they do, but that also means that they have a monopoly, virtual monopoly on how people get information, and they are fucking abusing it.
Although it was hysterical. Trump on Truth Social saying that, the fact that they're putting Biden on Monday night is terrible because that's ratings hell. It's like, because everyone chanting for 20 minutes, which is what's going to happen Monday night. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
People chanting that won't be on social media the next day. It won't be replayed ad infinitum.
Golly, no.
Anywhere else. No one will share that on Facebook.
Oh, as a brief aside, the Harris Walz campaign press releases.
Oh, their comms team is just on fire.
They're fire. And the one today about Donald Trump will be telling a bunch of bullshit lies, but in a different home.
Yes, right.
Okay, all right, I see. At least one of the gloves is off, which I'm very glad to see.
Yeah, very glad to see that. We are on Saturday. Right-wing social media was promoting the conspiracy theory that images of Kamala Harris's campaign rallies were AI generated to explain her big crowds, because it couldn't be real. By Sunday morning, Donald Trump had gone all in on that lie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, he's back on Twitter, which is why the value of his pretend social media site is cratering.
Yeah.
And his interview with Elon Musk went about as terribly as it could be expected. And again, the comms team at the Kamala Harris campaign talking about, this guy doesn't know how to run a live stream, really?
Yeah. Well, and a couple of rich assholes cackling about firing striking workers.
Firing striking workers, which
going to go over great in Pennsylvania.
The UAW is now filing a legal complaint against them for that. That's illegal.
Womp womp.
Yeah.
Many of the young people, maybe the young people will actually save us. it's possible. Although Greta Thunberg is right to say, how dare you do that kind of statement? But the blockbuster story of the week was about former U.S. Senator Ben Sasse, who was the great white hope of the Never Trumpers. And it comes from Garrett Shanley, who is a fourth-year journalism major and the summer 2024 university editor for the student newspaper, a student newspaper called The Alligator. Quote, in his 17-month stint as UF president, Ben Sasse more than tripled his office's spending, directing millions in university funds into secretive consulting contracts and high-paying positions for his GOP allies, unquote.
Man, and he's just copying off of Ronna McDaniel.
Oh, yeah.
Who found all kinds of RNC contracts for her husband's company.
Sure. Who's going to stop them?
Tina Peters, MAGA election denier, who I am convinced is the reincarnated Orly Tates.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she has that vibe. Absolutely.
Yep. She refused to certify the election. Tina's from Colorado, and for her, Donald Trump and the cult lie are 1,000% real. She woke up facing 22 years in federal prison after being found guilty of 7 counts of election interference a few days ago. Ms. Peters says her trial was rigged by the deep state because she wasn't allowed to present evidence that people in Serbia rigged our 2020 election. Yeah, and I think she probably does want to see Barack Obama's Social Security number.
Oh, yeah. And his...
like Orly. She's very Orly Tates.
And his birth certificate and his transcripts.
Yeah,
And blood tests, because maybe he's gay. Maybe he's a woman. I mean,
maybe
we don't even
Serbian.
know. Maybe Serbian. He might be a Serbian lesbian hiding out in the United States. We don't know.
And
no one knows
our
this.
Elections.
This is all. No one knows anything. This is all unknowable by science. And speaking of traitors, this is from Axios. Former President Donald Trump, remember him? Spoke on the phone with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday to discuss the Gaza hostages and ceasefire deal, according to 2 U.S. sources who were briefed on the call. As Will Bunch noted, this is Nixon, 1968, and the Vietnam peace talks all over again, except Trump didn't even bother to use an intermediary like Anna Chennault.
No, just called him and interfered.
Yep. Well, just like the border deal. Called up, blew it up because it's bad for me. It's bad. It gives me one less thing to talk about. So let's blow this shit up on purpose and then bitch that Joe Biden didn't fix it.
Yeah. Retired Republican Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina says he plans to vote for Donald Trump in November, even though he voted to convict Trump at his second impeachment.
Yeah. And he's retired. He's retired.
He doesn't want the death threats phoned into his house. That's what he doesn't want.
Well, maybe you're on the wrong team, asshole.
Maybe you're really on the wrong team. Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you'll remember Sean O'Brien, the Teamster president who spoke at the GOP convention. But now that the world has heard Trump and Musk sitting around cackling about firing workers on strike, Sean O'Brien says the following: firing workers for organizing, striking, and exercising their rights as Americans is economic terrorism, unquote. Yeah. Way to catch up. Way to catch up there, Sean. Way to wake up 20 minutes late for the train.
J.D. Vance is having another week. This week, Laura Ingraham asked him about suburban women voters and abortion rights. He replied, I don't buy that. I think suburban women care about normal things.
Keep talking, man. Just keep talking.
Just keep talking.
Yeah.
Then Heartland Signal released new Vance audio of an interview from 2020 in which J.D. Vance agreed with a podcast host who says having grandmothers help raise children is the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female.
Well, that and Soylent Green. So, those are the two
uses. He also
uses.
agrees when the host says grandparents helping raise children is a weird, unadvertised feature of marrying an Indian woman.
Keep talking. Just keep talking.
He didn't think anyone else was listening outside the bubble of whatever that dude bro. I'm sure they were real into crypto too on that podcast. Now, something like 24 people showed up for a J.D. Vance speech this week, and sure, that's funny, and the pictures are funny. But the news here is they can't afford an advance team to get butts in the seats. It takes phone calls, takes postcards, it takes getting on local radio, it takes grunt work. And here's the deal. This campaign has people working for them that we know. And those people that are on the masthead of the Trump campaign have years of advanced team experience. They've run campaigns before. Chris LaCivita has run campaigns before.
Mm-hmm.
And they also allegedly have millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to spend.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear they don't have anything.
Right.
And like I said, so much of politics is done at that dirt floor, folding chair, outdoor rally level.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get people to punch in 5 digits into their phone and text, go Trump. So you can collect their phone numbers, so you can text them back and ask them to volunteer and knock on doors.
100%. Yep.
And oftentimes what happens with all this, setting up the folding chairs and having the banners there and making sure everybody has the right sign and the people behind the speaker are the right demographic mix. That's done by organizers, and a lot of that grunt work is done by union volunteers.
Absolutely. And another factor, I mean, we played near the top of the show a clip from one of my favorite movies, The Lion in Winter, about winning. About, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm winning. And other than being one of the most quotable movies ever, that's a really good sentiment because everyone knows what Donald Trump's campaign is going to do. They have no secrets left.
Right.
They're going to double down on being racist. They're going to double down on being crazy. They're going to double down on him standing in front of a podium screaming nonsense at a bunch of houseplants.
And apparently they're going to double down on being really stupid when it comes to women.
Well, just being assholes. Because if you're not being a misogynist, racist asshole, your base will leave you.
Off-brand. You're off-brand.
So you have to, and that's all you got. That is all you have. That anchor around your throat is the only thing you have to hang on to. So they're hanging on to it like grim death. And they didn't think they'd be in this position. They thought, well, we're going to run against Joe Biden. We don't need to do any more rallies. We don't need to do any more advance work. J.D. Vance can be from fucking Mars and nobody will care because it's going to be me and Joe. And the thing is, the opposite is not true. They do not know what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will do tomorrow. They have no idea. They cannot predict, and they were not ready for these people. And that's who wins in these things generally. The people who have the element of surprise and the people who are fighting the same battle they were fighting last time and the time before, and everyone knows what they're going to do, and it's tired, and it's not working this time, and they have no fucking plan B. Now,
no, but let's lay the blame where it belongs. This is Laura Trump's fault.
Yes, it is.
This goes all the way to the top of the Republican National Committee. And Kamala Harris holding a rally in Milwaukee during her convention at the Milwaukee Arena where the Republican National Convention was held. Imagine the comparisons in crowd sizes. When you have delegates who plan to be there for months for the Republican National Convention, and then you have a rally that goes to the rafters. I mean, that convention, I've said before, was so puny.
And slow. Low energy.
And low energy. Very low energy.
And just weird and smelly. But you know what? Trump campaign has a solution, Blue Gal.
What?
A secret weapon named Corey Lewandowski. Ever heard of him? Huh? Ever heard of him? They're bringing him back on board.
It's another violence against women, allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly sex pervert, allegedly.
Yeah. Bringing him back. And don't forget, he's all those things, and he is was a speaker at the Sangamon County Republican Party Lincoln Day dinner
That's
4 or 5 years ago. So don't tell us we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to Republicans in the Midwest, because we sure as hell do.
Well, speaking of Republicans in the Midwest, let me tell you something. In local news, the Sangamon County Board blocked a referendum to allow voters to oust future sheriffs. This in the wake of a Sangamon County cop who should never have been hired in the first place, murdering Sonia Massey in her own home. More than 200 people, and that's like 20 times what usually shows up for these meetings.
Very few people ever show up at these meetings.
More than 200 people clapped, cheered, and yelled their support at the August 13th Sangamon County Board meeting for changes at the Sheriff's Department beyond the resignation of Sheriff Jack Campbell in the wake of the shooting death of Sonia Massey. But one of those suggested changes, a binding referendum on the November 5th ballot to establish the ability of voters to oust any future sheriff, failed to move forward after the board voted 6-20 along party lines, with all Republicans voting against and all Democrats voting in favor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you consider the county government is 6-20 Democrats to Republicans.
Yeah. And that explains, well, this is why we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is where we live. And by the way, my understanding is, because I know one of the people on the pro side, he's a really good guy, and this was not a surprise to him. He's the guy who rallied people, got it active, got it going. He's young, and he's a Democrat. And I was considering running for, a position on this board, because fuck these people. But our representative is a good Democrat, so I'm not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
But
no.
Apparently they configured the room. They had to get a special room because they were expecting a large audience. They configured the room so the board would have their backs to the audience.
Oh my
God! They wouldn't have to face them, and they could just vote in silence. And they didn't talk. They didn't raise any objections. There was no debate. They just sat there like potted plants until their boss told them it was time to vote, and then they all as one voted against it. And it's just a vote that says voters should have some ability to fire a sheriff, recall a sheriff if he's out of control. That's all it is.
And this sheriff is elected in the first place.
Yep.
So, yeah. No, this is ridiculous.
And I've had more than one person, including one older person, who are new, say, I had no idea how much autonomy cops have to do anything they want until this came up, and we discovered there's nothing we can do. There's no recourse, apparently.
Because the county runs the sheriff's office.
Right.
And the county is 20-6 Republicans.
And until he decided to resign, he wasn't going anywhere. So,
right. Well, I think that puts a spotlight, as you say, on county government.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me, you said, there's a very good Democrat, black woman who is our representative on the county. Yep. I'm not going to run against her. I was ready to run if it was someone, if it was a Republican. I was ready to run against him. You're not the only one. You're not the only one looking now to see who's my representative on this board.
Yes. Facing
away from the people. And can I vote? Can I go and run against them? Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of knocking on doors about that election.
Yeah.
Next time.
Well, and it was impossible for Rodney
Davis.
Rodney Davis to lose until he lost to Nikki Brzezinski. And that required rewriting the boundaries of the congressional district and gerrymandering.
It required gerrymandering it twice. Yeah.
But we got it done. And now he's gone, and we have a real good Democrat in that seat. So things can actually change on the ground here. And I don't care what George Will wrote in the Washington Post about Illinois.
Oh, God. We'll have to do a whole nother show. Tuesday, I want to make sure we address George Will and his slander against Illinois. We will do that.
That's a good point. Let's move on, shall we?
Yeah. Each week we post an internet kitty sent in by you, the listeners. We post that to our Facebook page and website. This week's internet kitty is Oscar. Oscar was found as a kitten in a trash can. Aw. Mm-hmm. But he's living his best life now at age 17. And he's today's internet kitty. And of course, Oscar Eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cat will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured.
Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh my Lord, it's freshly poured.
And you can visit Oscar, and they spell it the good communist way, Oskar, at our Facebook page or website, proleftpod.com. And you can send your internet kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com. Subject line, internet kitty, regardless of what kind of animal you're sending. Please put internet kitty in the subject line. And you can write to both of us at proleftpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to write us. We do love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions! Letter on the air, unless you say otherwise.
And I'm sorry, I blew it.
That's okay.
Because I'm. You should know out there in TV land, we do use notes from time to time, and I'm in charge of them. And my notes now say, "And Happy Independence Day," which it manifestly is not. So you'll excuse me for that. But let us get on to our gourmet coffee guidelines, shall we? Don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job. And if you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/ProLeftPod. Please share our show on social media. And if you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen, especially if you're up at the Democratic National Convention and you can buttonhole Tim Walz and say, Tim, baby, sweetheart, this will really give you a bump. This is good for you, good for me, good for America, good for the Midwest, good for America. And thank you for doing that.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties are ready and able to ask the tough but fair questions about fermentation and catnip that other journalists are too scared to tackle.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.